When immigrant children are separated from their families at the border, this is where many of them go. A look inside one of the government's holding facilities in Texas. And SDGE wants customers to pay more for years to come. Details on the new proposed rate hikes.
We do need rules and we do need clarity. That's a lot of the source of frustration on both sides.
The city of San Diego is still trying to find a way to deal with short-term rentals. Mayor Faulconer lays out his new plan.
Even if it's only 20 minutes away, a student can see there's someone like me out in the world of work.
It's virtual technology that's changing the traditional field trip. See how it's working for one local school district. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. For the first time, we're seeing the conditions inside a facility where immigrant children are being held. The shelter is located inside a former Walmart building in Brownsville, Texas. Right now, authorities are holding 1,500 children inside. Some of the children were alone when they crossed into the U.S. Others were separated under the Trump administration's zero-tolerance policy.
We don't want this to be a problem. The president has tried to address it a number of occasions. We've laid out a proposal, and Democrats simply refuse to do their job and fix the problem.
First of all, there is no law that requires families to be separated at the border. This was the administration's choice to move from civil matters and immigration onto criminal, to criminally prosecute people who come across the border illegally, and therefore you have to separate families. So why did the administration find that this was necessary, and if it continues to not have much of a deterrent effect, will you continue this policy?
Again, the laws are the ones that have been on the books for over a decade, and the president is enforcing them.
Think of the stress of these children. They take a baby away from a nursing mother. They tell someone we're going to give the baby a shower or a bath, and then they take the baby, put them in a car seat and drive them away. This is not normal.
I do think it ought to be addressed. We believe it should be addressed in immigration legislation. So what's happening at the border and the separation of parents and their children is because of a court ruling. That's why I think legislation is necessary.
Republicans say they plan to vote on competing immigration bills next week that might change this policy. However, it's uncertain that either bill has enough support. It will be tied to other immigration matters, including funding for a new border wall. San Diego Gas and Electric wants to raise customers' bills nearly 30% over the next 4 years. The largest increase would be 11% next year. By 2022, the rates would rise 28% from current levels. SDGE says the extra money is needed to modernize its equipment. The decision on whether to approve the increase will be made by the California Public Utilities Commission. It's holding a series of public forums. The first was last night in El Cajon. Others will be held in Escondido and Chula Vista in the coming weeks. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer is entering the debate over short-term vacation rentals. KPBS Metro reporter Andrew Bowen has more on the mayor's proposed regulations laid out in a press conference this morning.
The City Council has been debating short-term rentals for years and has repeatedly failed to reach consensus. A special meeting last December lasted hours, but no majority on the council could agree on how or whether to regulate sites like Airbnb. Now, after a long silence on the issue, Mayor Kevin Faulconer is putting forward his own proposal. He says it's a compromise.
We've seen some starts and stops at the council. So what I did is I said I want to make sure that we're working together, taking some of the best parts of the proposal, but keeping in mind the overall goals, which is have a clear rules of the road that we can protect our neighborhoods and move forward. And I think that this achieves that.
Here are some key points in the mayor's plan. Hosts can rent out part of their home, like a spare bedroom, with a simple registration, as long as the host remains on site during the guest's stay. To rent out an entire home, a host needs a license from the city. A host can have up to 2 licenses, one for their primary residence plus another for a spare home. That cap of 2 licenses per host does not apply to Mission Beach, where hosts can hold unlimited licenses. And the licensing fees will pay for a new enforcement division that will operate nights and weekends, responding to noise complaints and other nuisances. John Anderson rents out a small granny flat in his backyard, something the mayor's proposed regulations would not allow. Still, Anderson says he's ready for a solution.
We do need rules and we do need clarity. That's a lot of the source of frustration on both sides. And so I think the number one is we do need to put rules in place. Even if that's not something I'm 100% behind, it needs to happen.
The city council will take up the mayor's plan on July 16th. If the regulations get a majority on the council, they'll go into effect in January 2020. Andrew Bowen, KPBS News.
It took 2 weeks to count the votes, but San Francisco has a new mayor-elect. London Breed secured victory by just a few thousand votes. She will be the first African-American woman to hold the office and the first woman since Dianne Feinstein in the 1970s.
I'm London Breed. I am president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors and soon to be mayor of the city and county of San Francisco. The campaign is over. And it is time for us to forget about the drama that existed in the world of politics during the campaign, and time for us to focus on addressing these challenges so that we can make our city better for all San Franciscans. Yeah.
Right now, the mayors of America's top 14 cities are all men. That will change next month when Breed is sworn in. Despite her incumbency, San Diego Councilwoman Myrtle could be the underdog in November's general election. iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castaneda has some numbers that help explain why.
These are numbers from last week's primary that might worry Councilwoman Myrtle. Almost 61% of the people who voted in her council race supported someone else, and she only finished first by about 200 votes. Cole once seemed a shoo-in for re-election in her southeastern San Diego district, but that may no longer be the case. Here's what Brian Pollard, who runs a nonprofit in the district, told me.
That momentum has changed, and now she is the underdog.
But here are some numbers Cole may find encouraging. She raised 3 times as much money as Monica Montgomery, who finished second and will face Cole in November. Cole also goes into the fall with about $45,000 left in her war chest. Montgomery has less than $5,000. Montgomery is an ACLU attorney and used to work for Cole. She says she isn't worried about the fundraising gap.
You need money to move forward, but money is not going to win this campaign, and money can't buy a movement.
Cole says the general election will be different, but declined to comment further. For KPBS, I'm iNews Source reporter Leonardo Castaneda.
iNews Source is an independently funded nonprofit partner of KPBS. A plan to end the June primaries for some city elections has been rejected. City council members Chris Cate and Mark Kersey supported the idea. They claim the June primary creates a long and costly election cycle. 3 other council members voted down the proposal. In 2016, voters chose a top 2 runoff system for city council, city attorney, and mayor, which would require a June primary. San Diego voters picked their new district attorney last week. But how can you tell if a prosecutor is doing a good job? KPBS reporter Taryn Minto set out to answer that question.
The first time Miriam Krinsky prosecuted a criminal in federal court was decades ago. But she told KPBS on Skype she remembers coming home after and sobbing to her husband.
And he said, I'm so sorry. You can't win every case. You gave it your all. And I said, you don't understand. I said, we convicted.
The verdict was guilty, and the young, nonviolent offender in a large-scale drug conspiracy case was staring down a mandatory minimum of 10 years.
He was involved because his uncle was higher up. My guess is that he probably came from, intergenerational cycles of incarceration that are all too common for individuals in urban communities. He did very little in the course of that conspiracy.
Krinsky got the conviction, but she was conflicted over whether that meant success.
I had that young prosecutor's realization that what we do is incredibly impactful and it wasn't always the pursuit of justice.
Now she's counseling other prosecutors to look beyond conviction and incarceration rates with her nonprofit Fair and Just Prosecution. She's part of a new school of thinkers reevaluating success in the prosecutor's office. But the question is, how do you measure it? For that, Krinsky points across the country to this guy.
Basically, Luca Kutateladze.
Kutateladze?
Yes, it's good enough.
He's an assistant professor at Florida International University's Department of Criminology and Criminal Justice.
We're developing a new set of performance indicators that taps into issues of fairness, efficiency, impartiality, effectiveness, and we're thinking how we can use existing data the prosecutors have or collect additional data to inform decision-making and to inform the development of new policies and practices.
For example, tracking cases that are dismissed because a witness doesn't want to cooperate.
And if over time, on a quarterly or monthly basis, we see an increase in the percentage of cases that are dismissed because of the victim or witness cooperation, it's a clear indication that something else needs to get done in terms of community outreach and engagement.
So it is a shift of research, and I think that's great.
That's Melissa Labriola with the think tank RAND Corporation. She says this sort of outcome-focused indicators differs from more traditional measurements,
like conviction rates and time to disposition, case processing time.
But she says these more familiar indicators play an important role. A 2007 study from the National District Attorneys Association found they can help determine how well an office achieves certain objectives, such as sentencing length for holding offenders accountable, case processing time for timely justice, and rate of repeat offenders for reduced crime. Still, the study relied on a survey to assess the public's attitudes about prosecutor effectiveness, which Labriola says obviously is not a precise measurement.
One would say, oh, my DA is doing a good job, like if they feel safe, or if their communities feel safe, or if the police and community relations are, so kind of more these more macro outcomes. More macro feelings. And those are really, really hard to measure.
So back to where we started. How do you know if your DA is doing a good job? Labriola says traditional methods are still relevant, and innovative indicators like the Florida International University Project are helpful. But success is too subjective to definitively answer that question. However, collecting data is important.
Without a is this good or is this bad? But just knowing what's going on in your office and whatever measures you're collecting is always a good thing. And then you can look at trends and you could see is there a difference? Some policy gets implemented. Does that change your numbers?
A group in upstate New York is working to make this sort of data readily available online. The group plans to eventually provide data from every county in the country. Taryn Mento, KPBS News.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, the Justice Department's watchdog finds the FBI broke protocol, but that its work was not biased during the 2016 campaign. That's at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
This is what it looked like in New Jersey today, where sports fans can now place their bets. The state led a case that resulted in a Supreme Court decision that clears the way for legalized sports gambling throughout the country. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy placed a $20 bet on Germany to win the World Cup, which started today in Russia. The biggest event in gaming, the E3 convention, wrapped up today in LA. One of the major headlines was from Facebook, which is launching a new online portal for gamers. For years, Facebook has provided a basic level of gaming. The new platform is geared toward competing with industry leaders like YouTube and Twitch.
What's different is that those games aren't often the big names that we hear at this show at the E3. They tend to be much more casual. And so could Facebook become more than that? I don't know, right? Facebook right now is kind of known as a broad-based platform, whereas there are comparatively fewer gamers in the world. So we'll see.
Facebook's gaming platform will include esports, which is now a $1 billion industry. Collections will stop and debts will be forgiven for students of a for-profit college system. California's Attorney General announced the agreement today with a debt collection company linked to Corinthian colleges. The Corinthian case led to a $1 billion fraud settlement, but those who took out student loans were still being required to pay them back. For the first time, a major research university will not require an SAT or ACT score for admission. The University of Chicago says the change will help level the playing field for students from low-income and underrepresented backgrounds. The university will also waive tuition entirely for students whose families make less than $125,000 a year. Less funding for local schools mean fewer field trips, but one local school district has found a solution: virtual field trips. Join education reporter Megan Burks as she test drives the technology by taking students on a virtual tour of KPBS.
There's 51 classes as of last night.
Ed Hidalgo of the Cajon Valley Union School District scrolls through thumbnails on a tablet.
So we have Miss Kinnearnum, so that's Blossom Valley. We have Miss Brandt, this is Rios.
Each thumbnail represents a classroom tuning in live.
And this is where your class is, Mr. Peterson's class at Meridian.
More than 1,200 faces waiting and watching. It's a lot of pressure.
Hey, this is Megan at KPBS. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. You can get started anytime you'd like.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Megan Burks. I'm a reporter here at KPBS in San Diego, and you can see, hopefully behind me, you can see a newsroom. We have about 36 journalists.
The platform making this all happen is called Nepris. The online tool lets schools access a full catalog of workplace tours. They can also tap into their local community to schedule live tours like the one I'm giving. All it takes is a tablet or computer with internet access.
And we're going to take you over to somebody who is working. So she's pitched a story, she's been out in the community, she's gathered her footage or all of the information she needs, and now she's working on her script. So she's putting it all together. So just like you guys, maybe you read a book and you look at different source material, you pull up an encyclopedia and get all of that information and then put something together. That's what Ebony Monet is doing, so she's over here.
Schools pay $3,000 to $5,000 annually for unlimited access to these industry chats. That's compared to around $300 to bus one class of students someplace just one time.
Now I'm adding color.
Since January, Cajon Valley has offered 113 of these virtual field trips.
You guys want to go upstairs to the crime lab?
From the forensics lab at the El Cajon Police Department to the district's very own central cafeteria.
We stick the tomato on, pull down the arm.
Hidalgo says the opportunity is significant in a district where more than 70% of kids qualify for free and reduced price lunch.
Might be excited to see one of our refrigerators.
There's many students who have never even seen the ocean. So we often say, how does a child aspire to a career they don't know exists? And with Nepris, we're able to connect business professionals to the classroom virtually. And for that reason, students get excited, they see what's possible. Even if it's only 20 minutes away, a student can see, there's someone like me out in the world of work. I want to do that job.
In this case, he couldn't be more right.
As we're going down here, I'll tell you a little bit about myself. So I actually grew up in El Cajon. I was a Rios Roadrunner, and I was also a Blossom Valley Bobcat, and I went to Greenfield, and it was at Rios that I learned that I love to write.
Hidalgo says that kind of early insight into one's interests lays the groundwork for success in school and career, and it's why the district invested in Nepris.
And what we know is that interests have the highest correlation to career satisfaction, performance, and income. So we can help students understand how their interests connect to the world of work. There's a greater chance they'll select a more aligned course of study that aligns to a future career.
The district can't say yet whether its efforts have improved academic outcomes. It's only been using Nepris for a year. But Meridian Elementary School teacher Ronnie Peterson says he's seen its impact firsthand.
I've always tried to make sure that during math, if I'm teaching about geometry or perimeter area, that I can tell them, hey, this will help you when you build a fence, or this will help you when you lay carpet or tile. I've always tried to make education relevant, but this makes it very relevant because now they're starting to see what's ahead. Like they can set goals for their future. I had one student, he wants to be a chef, an executive chef, and so he's taking cooking classes, right now.
that kind of a thing. So he's got his goal for the future, and he's got his short-term goal right now.
So, do any of Peterson's students want to be a journalist now? We asked 5th graders David Hanno and Mary Azabo.
I really like being a doctor. I want to be either a doctor or a lawyer. A doctor because I'm really interested in the heart and how it functions and stuff. And a lawyer because I just love to argue.
Go ahead, ask the question.
Okay, so if you're a news anchor, then how much do you get paid?
Luckily, the Nepris platform let me talk with students in other classrooms too. And across town at my alma mater.
So I'm from Rios, and I can see myself growing up as a reporter just like you.
1 out of 3, I'll take it. Megan Burks, KPBS News.
Quick work today by CAL FIRE when a brush fire ignited in Ramona. These are pictures firefighters shared on Twitter. The fire started around 11:30 this morning off State Route 67 and Rancho Maria Avenue. Firefighters say it spread from a truck fire. 35 acres burned, mostly open space, but some minor damage was done to a nearby home. San Diego County has seen several small fires in the past few weeks, and local fire officials are ramping up for the fire season. CAL FIRE says it's confident it has enough resources to prevent a large-scale incident. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman has more.
As soon as the days warm up and the fog left, we started going to fires every day, and that is concerning for me.
CAL FIRE San Diego Chief Tony Meacham says as more fires flare up across the state, local resources will be stretched.
As we continue to get busier and other places have fires and we start seeing, sharing aircraft, I think that's when we see some of these smaller fires that escape and become major fires.
CAL FIRE says response times in rural parts of the county are currently averaging around 10 minutes.
That 1.5 million acres that we protect is really hard to serve.
Part of that protection includes taking more preventative measures.
That has to be our long-term strategy, is what do we do with all this dead brush and trees that I've talked about? Do we just be reactive and wait for a fire to occur, or do we become proactive and talk about getting back to prescribed fire and getting back to doing fuel breaks?
Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
Over the course of the next couple of days, we will notice the marine layer steadily increasing. What does that mean? A cool down not only for many of the shoreline locations and out toward the coast, but some of the inland valleys as well. We're going to be talking about the potential for some more changes, though, as we venture into next week. But pretty quiet here in the short term. Satellite and radar not really showing anything. There's going to be a subtle increase in mid-level moisture as we go throughout the next 12 to 24 hours, but the bulk of the precipitation will stay again off to the east. What will happen is the onshore flow will strengthen. There'll be some low clouds, potentially even a little bit of drizzle out there. Not so much the case for tonight, but the clouds come back into place as we drop down to 65. Overnight low temperatures falling off into the mid-70s around Borrego Springs, Mount Laguna 57. Chula Vista down to 64. Oceanside dropping down to 61. And for tomorrow, clouds slow to erode toward the shoreline. Notice a little cooler as well than recent days. We'll trim back the warmth. 71 in San Diego, Ramona 84. And again, talking about numbers here out over the interior, of course, much warmer. Borrego Springs 101, Mount Laguna topping off at 75 degrees. So the outlook over the weekend, the onshore flow at its strongest. It will back off some as we venture into early next week, but overall we stay on the dry side. And the Padres away right through the upcoming weekend. Let's check out the coast here and notice some drizzle possible here at the strongest point, the onshore flow, more so a Saturday night to Sunday morning. And then we'll start to slowly see the onshore flow back off Tuesday into Wednesday. I think the more noticeable impacts at that point would be over the inland areas where temperatures start to climb back and there's less drizzle and clouds Monday into Tuesday morning. Mountainous terrain, notice, will start to round the corner by Tuesday as temperatures slowly start to warm back up, and throughout the deserts, lots of sunshine here the next several days. Temperatures a little cooler Sunday with some mid-level moisture, and then numbers going right back up as we venture into Monday and especially into Tuesday. For KPBS News, I'm meteorologist Justin Pavic. Back to you, Ebony.
Our media partner, iNewsSource, wanted to know how San Diego's older buildings would stand up to the next big quake. So they took a tour with geologist Pat Abbott and answered readers' questions, including the risks from a fault that runs through southeastern San Diego.
Okay, Vicky Church asks about comments on the inactive La Nacion Fault that follows part of 54th Street that runs south. It runs south almost down to the Mexican border. This is a fault zone that doesn't get talked about as much. First off, she puts parenthetically inactive ? I personally consider it to be an active fault. It's not a primary fault. The Rose Canyon Fault is pulling the land apart. That's why we have San Diego Bay. The land has been pulled apart. So as the land drops down to make San Diego Bay, it has to rupture and separate from the rest of the San Diego, Chula Vista area. And that's the La Nacion Fault, what we call down to the basin faults. San Diego Bay is dropping down. And the bad news is a lot of homes in that, I'm going to say greater Chula Vista, National City area, a lot of them have been built over the fault strands, which should not have happened, but it has happened. So I say treat that fault with respect. Do not build on top of it. I don't know if you're legally allowed to now. You were not. It was legal even a short time ago, but it definitely is an active fault. It's not going to make an earthquake as big as we get on the Rose Canyon Fault or Elsinore, maybe something in the magnitude 5s, but that was going to do damage to a home built on top of it.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.